Welcome to Shutdown Stories, episode 14. I'm here with Grayson Weir, a current writer for SB Nation, formerly with Fox Sports. Grayson, you got out of LA and Fox Sports at what seems like a pretty solid time now with all the shutdowns and especially the craziness happening in LA.
Yeah, it was definitely a kind of a quick decision that I made. After the Super Bowl, we went down to Miami. I was with the NFL team, so we put on all the production there, and then I decided I would jump back into sports writing, and all the timing has kind of lined up with reminding me that maybe this was a good call and kind of the right move. LA is still pretty locked down. They did announce today that sports can return potentially on June 1st, but beaches are barely open. People are pretty much stuck inside. I got out at a good time.
What drove that decision? Because obviously nobody can see the future. It's not like you're, oh, there's a big pandemic coming, time to change jobs.
Yeah. Well, I've always been more on the print side of things. I've always been more of a writer. Words are kind of my thing. So when the opportunity came, I had been with SB Nation part-time since August, and then working with the NFL team at Fox. And they said, hey, we'll give you a more expanded role to where essentially right now it's my blog. I mean, I can kind of post whatever I want, whenever I want. I'm kind of the only one doing so. So they were like, hey, we'll let you kind of have free reins to build yourself a portfolio using our platform. And it was a no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, what's your favorite piece that you've written for them so far? We talked a little bit when we've hung out about a couple of the pieces. You talked about comparing Lane Kiffin to Iron Man, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple. So SB Nation's fun to where we don't always have to do the hard-hitting journalism side of things day in and day out. We can write things. There was Marvel Week at SB Nation. I don't know if they actually had a like a team promotion with Marvel or what the deal was there, but it was Marvel Week, and Lane Kiffin and Iron Man, because the similarities are striking. You can go check it out at redcuprebellion.com. But Lane Kiffin's this guy. He's come from, he's built his way through the ranks after his father gave him the keys to be a head coach, more or less. Growing up under Monty Kiffin, Lane's always wanted to be that guy. And when the opportunity came, he got it at the highest level, kind of failed a little bit, but then ultimately built that Iron Man suit to get back to the SEC where he is today. A couple other things, just, there's been a lot of breaking news with the MLB draft, where some of the Ole Miss players will go, how it will affect the roster going into next year. There's a lot of different, at this point, it's really any content is good content because people are craving sports. And so finding those creative niches where it's not just, this happened, here's why, here's what it means. You can kind of go more into depth into some of the crazier stuff, like Lane Kiffin being Iron Man, or what do the quarterback's tweets mean, and kind of being conspiracy theory with them. Just some fun stuff, creative, trying to keep the content train rolling.
Yeah. Are you enjoying that, where you're kind of digging in the bottom of the bag and making those somewhat random comparisons of Lane Kiffin to Iron Man, or are you ready for sports to come back so you can write game recaps and kind of go back to that hard-hitting stuff about the impact?
It's getting to the point where I'm ready for everyone wants sports to come back, don't get me wrong. But this is kind of the stuff that we would be writing about typically between, late June to early August, in that period when the SEC championship or the NCAA championships for softball and baseball end in the spring, and then football training camp starts again in August. This is kind of that creative time where you can maybe a lot of people take vacations in the sports world, but you can be more creative with stuff, looking back on things in the past, looking ahead to the football season. It's now May 18th, 3:00 on May 18th, and we've pretty much scraped the bottom of the barrel for what we would have typically done. So I appreciate the fact that all the game recaps and stuff are easy, and kind of anyone can do those. So when you start to kind of position yourself, how can you be different? How can you be creative? How can you take this time to grow yourself, but then also the brand? That's the kind of positive spin for it. But yeah, I mean, sports being back would be nice.
Yeah. So let's transition into the shutdown. I want to go all the way back to the beginning. You were obviously just changing jobs from Fox Sports over to SB Nation. What was that kind of day or week like? Where I mean, I think the time where it really hit everybody was when Rudy Gobert tested positive right before that Jazz game. But what was your mindset like? Where was your head at when that news came out? Since obviously sports is your moneymaker, it's your paycheck.
Right. So LA, obviously being the big city that it is, we had heard rumblings of, this virus coming. We had known that it was a thing, probably late January, early February. That being said, I mean, we all traveled to the Super Bowl, which is a giant gathering. We didn't think anything of it. And then when I flew out here to Nashville, middle of February, I went to the airport and people kind of had masks on. And it was like, okay, people just taking precautions, certainly with all the international travel going through LA. And then, like you said, yeah, we knew it was bad, but we didn't know, at least this for people like me in the sports world, I think I speak for a lot of us, we didn't realize the extent that the virus would be until, right, Rudy Gobert was pulled off the court, the Jazz was pulled off the court. Then that next day, for someone like us, where we're covering primarily an Ole Miss beat, that I think it was that Thursday afternoon, Ole Miss or LSU rather, was scheduled to travel to Ole Miss, and boom, all of a sudden we received word that they had gotten on the buses and they were immediately pulled off the buses. So that was kind of when it was like, oh God, I thought when Rudy Gobert was pulled off, it was like, okay, they'll find a way to play without fans, or maybe there'll be some sort of, basically what we're looking at now, I thought would have been then. Obviously that wasn't the case, and it's weird. I mean, it's weird for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it is weird. There's no better way to put it than just being weird. We haven't lived through anything like this. Nobody has, and especially not in the version of pro sports that we have right now, where each league dominates a different portion of the calendar.
Right.
But it does feel like we're coming to the end of that. I mean, Bundesliga play kicked back up. I know the Korean baseball league started back up with no fans. And there's talks, like you mentioned, that we could be back to pro sports in America by June 1 or on June 1. What do you see as the biggest or let's call it the biggest kicker for that to happen? What is it going to look like from the mind of a sports writer?
I can't speak as a health professional. I
Obviously
like leaving these decisions up to the people that really know what they're talking about. But from everything I'm hearing, I mean, June 1st being announced from California, considering California was, as of 7 days ago, supposedly locked down infinitely. For them to come back now and say, we looked at the data, we looked at other countries. I mean, I think the first was Chinese baseball came back. I was watching Taiwanese baseball like 4 weeks ago or so, and they were playing without fans. That was like, okay, this can be done. Then Korean baseball is now doing it on a more significant level with a higher quality league with American broadcasts. And then China started bringing fans back. So now China has obviously like I don't know the difference between.
Yeah, I think 1,000 was the number that I heard, or 2,000 on one of the highlights for, I think even the Korean league now is up to that number.
Nice. Yes. I don't know what the scale is between MLB stadiums and Korean baseball league stadiums, but even 2,000 people being in the stadium is progress. Bundesliga came back over the weekend. I mean, that was fun. Live sports was great. We had a lot of Americans playing in those games. For it to come back in America, I think the bigger concern, for me at least, from everything I've read, I mean, again, I can't speak as Dr. Fauci. I can't speak as a health professional. But from everything I've read, my bigger concern is what happens in November, December, January, when maybe bowl season rolls around and there's a second wave. So it's not necessarily right now that worries me all that much. I think you can start to get back to, like the UFC was doing, they had 3 fights in 8 days.
Yeah.
That's a sport where it's pretty much naked dudes and females touching each other as close as you possibly can.
Yeah.
That is, if they can do that, then I think you can draw it back to a sport like golf, like we saw yesterday,
Hmm.
or baseball, where you're not, wrestling each other for 40 minutes over and over and over again. It's able to stay apart a little bit. I think a lot of what we saw yesterday in that Ricky, DJ, Rory, and Wolf match,
Hmm.
I think a lot of it was for show. I think there were some guys,
Sure.
with masks on, that it's all publicity. But as long as they're testing, as long as things keep progressing forward, I think sports will happen. The question is then, someone is going to test positive, whether it be in the NFL or in the MLB or even in college
Hmm.
football. What do you do then? Do you
Yeah.
quarantine the whole team? Do you? And
Hmm.
I don't have answers to these questions, and I
Yeah,
don't think
and
the
I
athletic
actually want to
workers
put
do either.
that specific question on hold because I want to go down the UFC rabbit hole a little bit.
Okay.
I watched UFC. I think it was 249 that just happened,
Hmm.
and no fans. It was when Justin Gaethje beat Tony Ferguson for the interim belt since Khabib Nurmagomedov didn't want to fight. But that was really striking to me as an event because obviously it's one of the most physically contacted sports. It's pretty much
Yeah.
naked people bleeding, breathing, spitting, hitting each other. But besides the medical issues that could come up there, and frankly, I'm assuming that Dana White and the UFC did a good job of clearing everybody. They said that they did testing as much as they could, that they got everybody cleared and quarantined once they were deemed healthy. But from a viewer standpoint, UFC without fans, I think, was the perfect guinea pig to show that sports without fans aren't pointless. I know a few people on Twitter were talking about it, and it's something that I noticed too. You could hear every strike,
Hmm.
every grunt, every kick. I thought that was incredible television, and I thought it put down a pretty clear roadmap of what sports could be like without fans. You're just going to be more involved. Fans at home are going to be able to hear everything. You can hear the corners talking. There was a fighter who mentioned that they heard one of the announcers talking about a strategy that he wished they were using, and that
Yeah.
fighter used that strategy the next round, won the fight. It's just like if you can incorporate stuff like that into NBA for the playoffs, I think it's a much more compelling, maybe not more compelling product, but it is at least an equally compelling product on the television.
I agree. I mean, certainly it lacked that when the fighters walked out. It lacked the
Mm-hmm.
energy, it lacked the excitement in a lot of ways. But once they get in the ring and Bruce Buffer says it's time, I mean, like you said, you could hear the contact, you could hear the hits, you could hear a lot of things you wouldn't typically have access to. And same with yesterday's golf match. I mean, maybe this is the progression that a league like the MLB needs, where they start miking up players throughout the game. Maybe
No, well,
this
think
is the
about the All
way.
Star game. The
Right.
MLB's already started doing that for the All Star game, so why couldn't they bring that to a regular season game?
I agree. And because it makes it more interesting, and leagues are struggling with the MLB in particular has a horrible marketing strategy. They don't do a very good job with getting the game to younger generations and to younger
Right.
fans and really growing it in the way that they could. Maybe this is what pushes them to do so. I hope. Um, but then on the flip side of things, like college football, um, if you play without fans in college football, there's already a problem to where fans aren't buying tickets because the experience is better at home. And it kind of is. I mean, as much as everybody loves going to a college football game, if I were to go to a game at USC right now, I'd have to get on a plane. I'd have to rent a hotel. I'd have to fly in. If I can just watch it at home, why wouldn't I? I can also flip between TCU Cal, or
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the week one college football slate. Ole Miss actually moved their, well, Ole Miss did, and ESPN probably did, moved their game from September 5th, which is the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, to September 6th. So it doesn't compete with other games. And I was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
if there's no fans, why wouldn't you spread things out more? Because if I'm sitting
Oh
at
yeah.
home that week one and I can choose to flip between Ole Miss Baylor, between Oregon and North Dakota State, who I think is going to upset Oregon,
Ooh, hot
um,
take alert.
and then like TCU Cal, why wouldn't I flip between all the games? Ole Miss is moving it to then Sunday, so they can have all the eyes of the nation on Lane Kiffin's first game in the SEC. without fans. I don't think they're going to put fans in NRG Stadium. So then maybe that poses a problem for that situation where people start to realize, why would I go to the stadium when I can just watch it on my couch? But for leagues like the MLB, like the UFC, that kind of extra added audio, I guess, is really what it comes down to. You get the
Intimacy.
audio. Yes, intimacy. It's a great word. I thought it was fantastic. Same with yesterday's golf
Hmm.
match. Having those guys mic'd up. I mean, Matt Wolf made that one comment that he
Oh,
probably shouldn't have, which is pretty funny. What do you
dude,
say?
Matt Wolf might have been my favorite part about that whole event yesterday.
Absolutely.
I can't remember what hole, but I want to say it was like 13, 14 when they were in the middle of all those skins piling up. Ricky made probably like a 20-foot birdie putt, and Matt
Mhm.
Wolf is standing in the back room, mic'd up, going, "Oh yeah, oh yeah."
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
it's one of those things where you go, "Oh yeah, this is a 21-year-old kid. Is he a
Hmm.
pro golfer? Yes. Is he making a lot of money doing it? Yes. He's still 21 though."
Absolutely. It made him relatable, and it made all those guys more relatable. Even in the fact that I mean, obviously, if the PGA comes back, they won't be carrying their bags.
Hmm.
But the fact that they were carrying their bags, I had walked 9 holes that morning and I was
Yeah.
exhausted. I can't imagine
Yeah, I
having to
walked
walk
9 holes with
18
you.
Seminole.
I walked 9 holes with you a few days ago, and
Yeah,
I barely made it through the nine. I was dying.
exactly. And so those guys are doing it in 92-degree, Florida weather or whatever it was, 85, what have you. It made the experience intimate, like you said.
Mhm.
I think that's a great word. So maybe it's a benefit in some ways, but hopefully only for a year. Hopefully it pushes people to grow, um, leagues to grow, and then they incorporate that in with the fan experience once they're
Yeah,
allowed to return, if
yeah,
they're allowed to return.
yeah. And if not, I think we've seen that it can work.
Yeah.
Grayson, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I think we've gone a little bit longer than I wanted to. I don't know how long the fans will want to listen to me talk, but I really appreciate you taking some time, man.
Yeah, it was fun. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.